Hello, once again. This is my informative speech, so I'm just going to tell you the purpose. The purpose of my speech is to explain some important times in Cedar Point's storied history and also shed some light on the future plans of Ohio's most popular destinations. Let me start off with a question. How many times have you asked yourself or a friend, what is there to do in Ohio? I know I've asked myself that many a time, but I actually had the answer because Ohio is actually home to one of the oldest and most visited amusement parks in the world. It's Cedar Point, of course. Cedar Point has a very storied history dating all the way back to the 1870s and has continued to provide thrills for nearly 1.5 centuries. That's thanks to a never ending drive to improve the park for future visitors. Now let's begin way back at the very birth of Ohio's greatest summer destination. Prior to 1870, the peninsula was used mainly as a fishing harbor and hunting grounds thanks to its lush like variety of wild game they had out there. But in the summer of 1870, everything changed when a local businessman named Louis Zistel opens a beer garden, a bathhouse, and a dance floor. That's right, that's how it all began, just with a beer garden and all of that. But forget all that. Let's move on to the thrill rides. Because in 1892, the first roller coaster at Cedar Point was built. It was called the Switchback Railway, and it had an astonishing 25-foot drop and went a crazy 10 miles per hour. Now, 5 years from then, in 1897, the park is sold to new owners at the Cedar Point Pleasure Resort Company of Indiana, and the groundwork for the modern day park begins over 100 years ago. In 1905, the very famous Hotel Breakers opens up, and it actually opened up with 600 rooms, so it could accommodate many people. And then in 1906, the famous Midway is built, containing games, food, and all the other attractions. It's the main area where you first walk in the park. It's the first thing you'll see. And then 5 years from then, 1911, the roadway that connects the resort in Cedar Point to the mainland, to Route 6 exactly, is announced, and in 1914 is completed. It was actually called the Cedar Point Chaussee, or something like that, and it becomes obsolete later, but we'll get into that. The park is actually sold once again, and in the 1950s it looked as though the park could be turned into a housing development under the new ownership. However, the groundwork had already been laid by the previous owners, so the new owners, George Roos and Emil Lagros, decided to try and make it the Disneyland of the Midwest. And in 1964, they built a historic roller coaster by the name of Blue Streak, and is still in operation in the park today. And then we'll fast forward all the way to 1978, when the first record-breaking coaster was built, and that is the Gemini. It was built as the tallest and the fastest in the world. Ever since the Gemini, every coaster has broke at least one record. They broke the height and speed record 4 times with the Gemini, the Magnum, Millennium Force, and the Top Thrill Dragster. They also broke other records such as tallest and fastest for certain types of coasters like the Raptor and the Mantis. But in 2007, they opened up a coaster with the steepest drop, and that's the Maverick. And now, into the future and modern times, the park is constantly making changes to hold its title as America's Rock and Roller Coaster, and to make the park an overall better experience for its guests. Just this past year, actually, they removed a coaster, but that was to make room for the Celebration Plaza, where they have live shows and parties for after the park is closed for the late night guests. And in 2013, they actually have plans to build a new coaster. It's a winged coaster, and from the rumors, they're going to take out the disaster transport and the Space Needle, and they're going to build it over there, and it's going to go over the car park and everything. It should be exciting. But in review, this has been like a brief history of Cedar Point, but it's a great place, so you should learn more about it. But in review, how the serene peninsula on the Lake Erie coast grew to become a place of summertime thrills, we have to remember its beginnings and its rise to fame. Just remember how the park began with just a bathhouse, dance floor, and beer garden. The guests were actually brought over on a ferry, and it cost them 25 cents. So they've grown pretty big since then. And then they, obviously after all that, they began implementing all their thrill rides and everything, all their record breakers. and they just kept building from there, and they still have future plans just to build more and more record-breaking rides. So as you can see, the park has had humble beginnings, but quickly became the thrill capital of the world with its constant drive to build both a family-friendly and adrenaline-junkie amusement park. So if you're ever bored, just remember, Ohio will always have Cedar Point. Thank you. Goodbye.